I'm all about growth. I've got a center of gravity because of my background in the consulting world. So I get to work with some organizations that have very large, very strategic deals that they can't afford to come in second.
Yeah.
And so I get to make my living helping them figure out how to do that well.
Well, you've also written a book called Unselling, which I love, and anybody who's in sales, it is a must read because it sort of turns a lot of sales approaches on its head. The title itself sort of speaks to that. But tell me about the essence of Unselling.
Yeah, it is a provocative title for good reason. I love kind of the provocation of things, but I guess the quick story is I came from large, well-respected selling organizations. IBM, Verizon are two kind of recognizable names. In mid-1990s, I joined Accenture. And this is a $4 billion professional services firm at the time, growing at a pretty good pace. I get in this great job, heading up business development for the firm. And I noticed right away that selling in a consulting firm is entirely different than coming from these world-class sales organizations. And you start saying, well, what's the difference? They're really, really bright, competent people who are problem solvers. They're truth tellers, and they don't have a selling bone in their body, right? Because that's not what they do. They aren't slick, they aren't slimy, they aren't any of those things. They go visit a client, the client says, here's the problem I'm having. They say, okay, I get it. I need some more information, but I think we can solve that problem. But I'm going to tell you the truth. And they're able to call the baby ugly, right? When the baby needs to be called ugly.
Which is a hard thing to do
It is. But it's all about trust. It's all about building relationships, something you know a lot about. And I've actually come to believe that you can build stronger, longer term relationships with people in that way if you have both the competency and I always say people are willing to let you lead them and really help them understand how to solve a problem with two caveats. One is that they have to believe you're competent, right? Whatever the topic is.
Sure.
And the second is they need to have confidence that your primary goal and your primary interest is their success, not yours.
Right.
And as soon as you meet those two conditions, it's amazing what clients will allow you to do and to help them and to be led down this journey to solve these problems. And that's really the premise of Unselling is it couldn't be much simpler.
I think you had a pretty fascinating experience that kind of served as a catalyst to throw you into this realm. You were at a retail store and someone was trying to sell you something.
Yeah, my favorite way to make this come to life for anybody is you walk into a reasonable clothing store, right? Not Marshall's, not Kohl's, but a reasonable clothing store. And you first thing that happens is somebody runs over to you and they say, what? May I help you? And every single time, human behavior, what do we say?
I'm good.
No, just looking, right? Everybody says the same words, just looking. And then they get 4 steps away. And what do? We hail them again. I could use your help to find out where the tan shirts are, or the yellow ties, or whatever it may be. And that's that. Can you think of a less onerous selling approach than "May I help you"? And yet, when we feel like we're being approached,
people reject that.
We reject that. And that was between that and the Accenture kind of problem-solving consultant approach, the light bulb goes on that says, maybe there's a different way to communicate.
Yeah.
How to build trust, how to build relationship, and how to gain the confidence of the customer.
Well, you talk a lot to sales leaders and sales organizations, and you help organizations literally map out a plan to secure $1 million sales. But you talk about this thin line between winning the sale and just losing it entirely. It's a very thin line. What do you mean by that?
Well, not only is it thin or narrow, it's also not well understood. And maybe the benefit I've had, we started in 24 years ago we institutionalized a process at Accenture to conduct third-party research on why we won and lost really large, really strategic deals. And the reason we hired a third party is we figured out that the clients won't tell us the truth.
No.
When a sales team asks a customer, why did we win or lose? Invariably, the answer is the same: price. And you know that's not, at least entirely true. So we hired a firm out of Chicago, and the insights we got from that was unbelievable. So literally for the last 20 years that I've been doing this kind of work, I've had that as part of the stool, one of the legs to the stool of my business, to go conduct face-to-face, not telephone, face-to-face. Let me talk to 3 or 4 of the key executives that were instrumental in the decision as an independent third party to understand the truth, the whole truth and nothing but the truth. And it's amazing what they'll tell me that they won't tell the team. And it's from that experience, Randy, that I've tried to share then with many, many other organizations, large and medium mostly. What are those insights? What are the things that you wouldn't understand otherwise to be able to approach then new opportunities in a more effective way?
Okay, so here's the deal. This is something that I'd love to dive into. And we're going to have you back to unpack this in a different conversation. But just give me a high-flying 30,000-foot overview, because I really want to get to some passion points that I know that are pressing for you. But give me a 30,000-foot view. What did you learn through that whole process?
I'll give you a couple of examples. One is the average organization tends to rely on the solution to win. And the logic goes like this. I've got a really good product or solution. The client is reasonably intelligent. All I've really got to do is convince them that I've got the best solution. And the fallacy of that is the best solution loses most of the time.
Really?
Absolutely. There's a guy named Jim Dickey. He has a firm called CSO Insights. He studies this for a living. And what he'll tell you is more than 50% of the time, the client chooses something less than the best solution.
Wow, tell me why.
Because it's relationship, because it's risk, because it's, again, we talked about trust, because they're primarily focused on time frame to implement. And that's why until you understand what the individual decision makers really care about, and it isn't always the business concern, right?
Interesting.
There's an element of the business and professional, but there's a huge element of the personal. Believe it or not, multi-million-dollar decisions are being made by really good, competent buyers on the basis of what's in it for me.
Okay, so how do you get to the heart of that? How do you figure that out?
You better spend a lot of time, and it's part of the buying and selling process. And one of the things that's often misunderstood or missed is in the early part of the process. If you can't get access to the right people, if you can't really understand what's motivating them on this decision, if you can't even influence some of the questions they're asking. I always pose to groups that I work with, when is the worst time for the client to figure out that they didn't have all the right questions and they didn't know what criteria to use, and they didn't realize that the solution that they picked doesn't provide some key function that's really, really critical? The worst time is after they've already signed the contract and committed the funds and everything else.
Of course.
So one of the obligations I think the organizations I work with have is we've got to do a better job on the front end to make sure that there are no surprises. And that takes time, and it takes access, and it takes influence, and it takes trust.
But it also takes some courage, does it not?
A lot of courage. Courage, I always kind of come back to two key C words: courage and confidence. And of course, competence doesn't hurt either. But that you're exactly right, Randy. Courage is key.
Well, it's interesting because a lot of salespeople, in my opinion, get excited when they just get the next appointment.
Absolutely.
In other words, they string out the conversation and they never really bring anything substantive to the table that might challenge the thinking, for fear that it may end this whole process and it'll be over. And so they're content just to get another call and another call and another call and another call, and that process can go on indefinitely, when in reality they may never be able to close that deal because they didn't ask the right questions up front.
Right, and or they were what I call affectionately or disaffectionately the deferential salesperson or the subservient salesperson. And that relationship looks like this, right? The client says jump, and we say how high, right? And you go through that entire process being mostly reactive and just celebrating that they're giving us time and they're asking us questions and permitting us to submit a proposal, when in reality the most effective people in these larger complex sales are because we're subject matter experts on whatever it is we do, you're creating this relationship, not this relationship. And it's collaborative, and it's business person to business person, and we're not, when they say jump, we don't say how high. We in the South, we say sure, right? That's kind of our normal first response. Sure, but why? I mean, I'm happy to jump, but tell me why you want to take that step, because as I've worked with others, there may be better ways to approach that.
Well, in reading Unselling, I think one of the main points you make is from day one, from the first encounter, the first meeting, bring something of value to the table.
There you go.
So make sure that you establish yourself as being competent, but also capable and courageous enough to ask the hard questions.
You bet.
Like, are you the decision maker? Do you have a budget for this? Yeah, and get to the heart of those. Better to get a quick no.
Absolutely.
So you can go on and move to other things than to string out a long maybe.
Yeah, and the only way you're going to get the truth is you build this rapport, you build this relationship again that says, you know, before I jump through hoops to convince you I've got the greatest thing since sliced bread, can we maybe first start with just a good rational business discussion as to what you're trying to accomplish, and if I'm not a good fit, I mean, the unselling statement is, there's a reasonable chance, Randy,
we may not match,
that we're not going to be a good fit. And what I want to do is make sure I understand what you're trying to get accomplished enough to at least point you in the right direction.
And I love that. I love that, because if we're not a good match, I can move on.
You bet.
And look for other people or other organizations that are a better match. And that's how you build a strong business. And I love this, man. We can stay here all day and play in this sandbox. Yeah.